So as a general rule, I personally try to stay away from most online debates. And the reason that I do try to stay away from these debates is because I found that a lot of people, when they're going back and forth with people online, they're not necessarily interested in uncovering the truth or interested in finding common ground, but rather they're interested in being the one who's right in a situation and you being the one that's wrong in the situation. So because of that, I've realized long ago that there's no point in going back and forth with people. You're rarely going to get people who are going to be open to your viewpoint. More so online, they just want to be right and they want to go on with their life feeling like they told you or they owned you inside of a conversation. But in this instance, I am going to talk about an online debate. And the reason why I am going to talk about it is because I think that the subject and what's being passed around by certain people has the effect to be devastating to any show of unity in our community. And what I mean by that is if we keep spewing certain things and just going by our emotion and saying things, a lot of things that don't make sense, and building on top of what doesn't make sense with each other, we're going to find that it's very hard to actually get to the truth and actually move forward as a collective people. And the thing I do want to talk about is this idea that black men are the white men of the black community. This is something that came out of an article months ago. And since then, a lot of people who want to feel this way, and I say you want to feel this way because you really don't have any facts to back you up, but a bunch of people who want to feel this way have been arguing it, have been repeating it, and have been saying it over and over again. So before we break this down, let's just set up some preliminary things that are commonly known. I don't think it should be an argument. We all should know that for the most part, while some women do rape men, and although it's hard to actually account for how many men have been raped by women, because most men probably would not admit that they've been raped by a woman, or see themselves as being a victim of rape. They probably see themselves as, well, okay, I consented in some type of way. But we do know that in most instances, it is more likely for a man to rape a woman than for it to be vice versa. I think that's universal. In addition, I think it's important to acknowledge that most men are not rapists. Most men have not gone out and took advantage of someone without consent. Most men just don't have that in them. And this is me going off of my personal experiences with men day to day in my life. Now, there are certainly men who cross the line in certain ways and do things. But when I'm talking about rape, when we're talking about serious things like sexual assault, I would say that most men probably would not fall into that category. But certainly a lot of men would, and certainly enough to be a threat to a woman who wants to protect herself from those types of advances. Now, that being said, are black men the white men of the black community? The reason why I think this statement is so stupid and so, I don't want to say dangerous, to me it shouldn't have even been a conversation after the article came out because it was just so baseless, is because we are completely diminishing the impact that white supremacy, that institutional racism has on the black community as a collective. Now, we should know that there's a difference between institutional racism and individual racism. Stokely Carmichael broke that down beautifully in his book Black Power, that when you're talking about individual racism, you're talking about one person that might call you the N-word, one person that might beat you up, might follow you home, do horrible things, might even light your house on fire or burn down your church. This is one person. Now, the danger is not so much when you have that one person, but it's when you have a whole system that's backing that person up. Because at this point, you're not just dealing with an individual who hates you, but you're dealing with a whole conspiracy of people and organizations and institutions that are working towards your detriment. That is what institutional racism is. Now, if you're calling black men the white men of the black community, you are essentially saying that they have the same ability to oppress black women and children, I guess. They have the same ability, they have the same means, they have the same institutions, they have the same criminal justice system, they have the same Wall Street, they have all of these entities, Department of Homeland Security. They have all of these things or something even comparable. You don't even need all of these. Name one institution that Black men have that can possibly do anything close to what has been done to the Black community by white men. And you cannot name any. So this is why this conversation should have stopped way long ago. And even if we get past the domestic instances or power that white institutions of racism have on people in America, you still have to go overseas and look at what's happening to our people, whether they're in the Caribbean, whether they're in Latin America, whether they're in Europe, whether they're in Africa. So look and see what's going on over there. Look at the looting that's happening in Africa. Look at the countries, the European countries that are going in and taking the resources to where the African people don't even own their own resources. This is institutional racism. So how do you fathom that Black men could possibly be the white men of the Black community? You are essentially saying that they have the same backing of institutions. You're either saying that or you're completely undermining or diminishing the impact that white racism has on us, because if you're not saying that Black men have these institutions, then you must be saying that white men don't have these institutions, that our biggest threat from white men is danger. Our biggest threat from white men is individual acts that are done against us. So this is why this argument is completely baseless. The other thing that must be acknowledged is we have people who do rape in our community, and from what they say, our community is higher than other communities. I personally think that this is a symptom of not just proportionality, but also a symptom of white supremacy being ingrained into our culture. I also think some of this is a symptom of poverty. You see this in a lot of impoverished areas, that women are less protected, children are less protected, predators are born. So this is certainly a thing that happens inside of different societies whenever you have certain factors there. But especially when you have proportionality, especially when you have poverty, these things are going to be worse than what they would be in the white community per se, since we tend to compare ourselves to them. But are we really going to put on every Black man? And again, I started with the assumption. Most men, and we're going to say most Black men, aren't rapists. So are we going to say that because, let's say 40% of Black men are rapists, and I completely do not think it's that high. Let's just say it for argument's sake. So because 40% of Black men are rapists, the other 60% are vehemently against rape. But because of that 40%, are we going to look at all Black men and say, all of you are part of something that because of these individuals committing? That's the same thing as saying the reason why we say that institutional racism involves all white people is because the institution behind it. However, if there wasn't an institution behind racism and there were white people who didn't feel racist, there were white people who did feel racist, then those people are not implicated. What implicates them is the system that's backing them up. It's not the fact that you have individuals committing individual crimes. So we have to separate this idea that the individual, because there are Black men that are horrible, but listen, Black women, if you're looking at a couple of Black men that are doing things, if you're looking at 1 out of 10 that are doing things that are horrible and saying, because of you, all Black men are the white men of the Black community, you're doing the same thing that they do to us whenever some of them will get online and say, all of y'all are baby mamas, all of y'all are ghetto, because of 1 or 2 people who represent Black women to them in their mind. You're doing the same thing. In either instance, calling us sellouts because one Black woman gets married to a white man, any instance where you're categorizing all people based off of the sentiments of a few, you are doing what they did to us, and that is you are drawing these assumptions of what we are based off of 1 or 2 people. And that should be completely against our moral code, because if anything, we should not have the tendency to do what they did to us to each other. Now, the other thing that has to be talked about is this idea of patriarchy in the Black community. And that is what I've seen a lot of people saying. They're saying that, well, we're not saying that Black men necessarily do all these things that you're talking about. I mean, they don't have a criminal justice system, or they don't do these things, they don't do those things. But Black men are beneficiaries of white men's patriarchy. And I think a lot of people, either are saying patriarchy without understanding what it is and having this thing in our mind that we think we know what it is. But let's go to the definition of patriarchy in case any of us are confused. So this is from Webster's Dictionary, and they say patriarchy is social organization marked by the supremacy of the father in the clan or family, the legal dependence of wives and children, and the reckoning of descendants and inheritance in the male line. Broadly speaking, controlled by men of a disproportionately large share of power. So there's two things in here to stand out. One, patriarchy is either men having, because they are men and the system is set up for them, that man having so much power that everyone in the family has to be dependent on him for their legal significance. If you want to buy a house, if you want to do this, if you want to do that, if you want to have any type of power in society, you have to be getting that from your relationship to the man. That's one instance. And then the other instance is men having power. Now, realistically speaking, can we really say that Black men in America, and we can break this down if y'all want to break it down to different countries, but I'm talking about America because I'm in America. African men in America, are we really saying that Black women are legally dependent on them to get anything for them or their children? And I think that the common answer is no. Now, are we saying that the whole society has to depend on white men? Of course, because more than likely, if you want to get a job, you have to go through a white man. If you want to go to law school, you probably have to get an acceptance letter from a white man. If you want to get a loan, you probably have to get that signed off by a white man. If you want to avoid jail, you probably have to go through a white judge. This is the case with white men. But to say Black men are a patriarchal figure, well, if we're going to go in the larger sense, most of those boardrooms, most of those courtrooms, most of those admission boards, it's not mostly Black men on those. In fact, there's probably more Black women. As I'm going to break down, Black women, when we talk about power, they're benefiting more from the white power structure than Black men. But if we're talking about the broader instance, no, we do not need to go through a Black man nine times out of 10 to get anything in this society. Most people do not have to go through a Black man because Black men are the most disenfranchised group in America, period. And if you want to argue with that, fine, but look at the criminal justice system. We have to acknowledge, as I think Michelle Alexander laid out very, very thoroughly in the new Jim Crow, when you go through the prison system, you become a disenfranchised individual. And we do know that while Black women are a great population in the prison community, mostly Black men are the ones that are in the community. Now, if we're talking about in the home sense, that there's a patriarchy that Black men benefit from and that they oppress us women for, y'all gotta be serious, because let's be real. Most of us in our communities do not have a Black father in our household. In fact, 58% of Black homes are without the Black father of that child being there. More than likely, if you grow up Black in America, it's probably a woman who's raising you. So it's not something to brag about that we have such an issue with keeping families together. But if we know the fact that we do have a crisis where Black men will leave out, some of them won't even take care of the kids, some of them will just walk away, and a Black woman becomes the one who has to get the child's schooling together, has to take the child to medical appointments. Predominantly, this is the case. Then how is it that there's a patriarchy in the family where, sadly, in 58% of our homes, the man is not even present? So that can't be the patriarchy that you're talking about either. So the only other patriarchy you could be talking about is power. You're saying that Black men have power over Black women. Now, usually when we talk about power, I would think we're not talking about strength, but we're talking about money. That's the power that we talk about when we're talking about things as far as discourses between groups. What's the power play? Who has more power over the other? If we're looking at power, I'm going to read you some statistics, particularly about Black women versus Black men. In the United States of America, Black men have a higher unemployment rate than Black women. Theirs is about 6.3, while Black women's is about 6.7, and this was from May of 2018. About 25% of Black women are earning their bachelor's degrees, where only 17% of Black men are. 59% of Black businesses in the United States are owned by Black women. So if we're honest, and this is where it becomes like painful, if we're honest, we're really not a patriarchy. If anything, we're more of a matriarchy. Because more than likely, if you're a Black child, you depend on a Black woman to get you through certain things. You depend on a Black woman for your legal rights. You depend on a Black woman to get you through school. You depend on a Black woman to take care of your health. You depend on a Black woman. So if we're really a matriarchy, why are we repeating what they call? I'm not saying that patriarchy isn't an issue. White patriarchy is certainly an issue, particularly between white men and other people. But if we're talking about the issues in the white community, certainly white men have an issue of being the patriarch inside of white homes. But this is not our issue. And then when it's not our issue, why are we repeating things and saying it just because that's what they say? And so if you say it, then hey, we must need that to be our truth too. It's not our truth. Why not talk about what's really going on? Why not talk about our true issues? Our issue isn't patriarchy. Our issue is the fact that our families are not together. Now, in no way am I saying that Black women are not facing sexism in our community. Absolutely, we face sexism. And a lot of this, again, was passed down from slave narratives. We faced the sexism of being called a Jezebel. And that is the idea that Black women are hypersexual. This is something that passed down from slavery. And you look at people like Sarah Bartman, who had to deal with being sexualized because of her body and her skin color. This is something that Black women have been dealing with for hundreds of years. Black women are looked at as being a mammy. And this is why you see depictions of Black women, as was done by Hattie McDaniel in Gone with the Wind, of being loud, obnoxious, being overweight, caring for the white children, loving the white children more than they love their own children. These are things that actually have passed down from slavery. We hear the ghettoization of Black women, the idea that Black women are ghetto. They don't have no husband. They only rely on welfare for checks. They don't have the means to actually care for their children. They're going to be mean and overbearing to their children. All of these are stereotypes that have been passed down, and me personally, I think they have become self-fulfilling prophecies as far as how we view ourselves. Because if we look at the issues that are going on, we do see that in our music videos, in our media, in different platforms, we depict ourselves as being as such. And so I do have a problem with the way that we are depicted, oftentimes by our men. I have a problem when you have only light-skinned women being the ones given shine in the communities and they being sexualized. It's not even like shine for a positive thing, because our light-skinned sisters a lot of times are being sexualized as some type of rib bone phenomenon and not being treated as being queens. We should have a problem when we see, it's usually one man with 20 women around him. Why is it that you are comfortable with having all these women being sexualized in your videos? Shouldn't you be looking at them and treating them as individuals and treating them as queens and treating them as something that you cherish instead of treating them as breezies or hoes or whatever you want to call them? So there's definitely issues of sexism, particularly that have been, to me, it's been molded in a particular way from our history in this country. That being said, Black women face horrible stereotypes. We regurgitate these things in our community. Black men regurgitate these things. All of us regurgitate these things. Let's also acknowledge that Black men face just as many stereotypes that Black women face. If you do not know, the reason why a lot of times Black women benefit as far as having more jobs or having more opportunities inside of corporate settings is because of the phenomenon called the fear of the Black man. It is well known that a lot of times people will hire people who they perceive as less intimidating, less dominant. And so they'll look for a Black woman before they look for a Black man, because as we know, when you see that Black face and that 6 foot tall or 6'5" tall man who's built and might be bigger or whatever, the perception of him is going to be of a dangerous individual. So the reason I'm saying this is, yes, we face sexism. Black men face their own type because they have been also sexualized as being sexual deviants. We all face these things. But moving forward, how do we address these dialogues? How do we address the relations that we have between each other? And many of them are horrible. Many of our homes are torn apart. Many of our people are going back and forth with each other and not upholding each other as being brother and sister. How do we address these breakdowns in our conversations without having to cast a negative light on an entire group of men? And many of these men might be your champions, and you're willing to put them inside of a certain light with the oppressor that brought us here and enslaved us for 400 years. So the question becomes, what is the solution to us and these issues that we have as far as division and as far as gender wars and even as far as sexism? Because again, sexism has been passed down to us by our oppressors. To me, the ultimate solution is to truly decolonize your mind and loose your mind from the way that we have been taught to perceive ourselves, to the way that we've been taught to perceive our men, and the way that we've been taught to perceive our women, and instead have an understanding of what it was prior to colonialism, prior to slavery, prior to these institutions that totally changed the dynamics of how we relate to each other. The reason why I do not call myself a feminist is not because I think that the definition of feminism, although people might take it different ways, but by definition, is just that you believe that women should be equal. There are feminists who believe that inside of a cultural frame. There are some that believe that as far as totally equal, meaning women and men should be the same. But the basic definition is that women and men should be equal. The reason I don't call myself this, although I do agree with this basic definition, is because I understand that this is a word, feminism, that came to being out of oppression that was not native to my people. If you study African societies pre-colonialism, what you'll find is that a lot of them were not just patriarchal societies, but a lot of them were matriarchal societies. There were not only women chiefs, but there were women warriors. There were women who were wise persons. Women had elevated positions in society, and it wasn't a shock. It wasn't something like, oh, wow. Now, there's always been gender roles. That's the thing that we have to understand that is separate. I don't think that there's anything wrong with gender roles. If anything, I think gender roles are evolutionary for the most part, particularly when you look at ancient African societies, because it makes sense that if the man is more athletic, as far as being able to run quicker or being able to be more to kill quicker, to do certain things quicker, it just makes sense that why would the woman be out there hunting if the man just had this natural ability? In addition, I do think that women are more nurturing than men. I've seen men with children, I've seen women with children. It's not to say that their men's love of the child is any less, but the way that a woman has the natural inclination to nurture a child, that is something that I do think is natural and evolutionary. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with gender roles. I think the issue is whenever you have the gender roles that interfere with women obtaining power, interfere with women obtaining prominence in society, if that's what they want to do. That's when it becomes a problem, because we have to understand that as a people, our society, how we're doing, is only going to be as far as how the women are doing. If the women in society are not doing well, if the women in society are not allowed to practice self-determination the same way that men are allowed to practice it, then that's a problem, because we cannot say that we're doing well when half of our race is subjugated to a system where they are put in inferior positions. So what I'm saying is, I think the solution is to remember who we are, to remember what women were prior to colonialism and prior to slavery. And instead of addressing our issues and framing our issues in a way that has been framed by white women who are fighting a patriarchal system, maybe address our issues in a way that where we first decolonize the mind, and from there take away all the things that we've inherited from colonialism, take away all the things that we've inherited from slavery, and say that we're going to move forward in a way that we can engage with each other with not looking at each other in the same way that our oppressor taught us to look at each other. So to me, that's the solution. It's not to continue with the same back and forth, but to come together and try to find a way to solve these issues, because the common issues that black men face are common to what a black woman face. So that's all I have on this subject. I'd love to hear what all of you think, and I will see you on another video.